Today we will answer the question, what is a residual? Basically, you can think of a residual as merely a measure of error, or how far off your predicted value was from the actual value. Pretend that I have a 10-year-old girl come up to me and ask me to guess her age. If I take the actual age and I subtract away the predicted age, I'll get the residual. So she's actually 10, I guessed 8, my residual is 2. Then I make a second guess. She's 10, I guess 7, the residual is 3. And then finally, she's still 10, but I guess 11, and you can see that in the case where I overestimated with my predicted value, that it ended up causing the residual to be negative. So the size of the residual tells me how far off I was, and whenever it's a positive value, it means that my guess was lower than the actual value, and whenever it's negative, it means that my guess was higher than the actual value. Of course, in real life, I'm probably not going to be guessing ages. Rather, you usually go collect data. So assume that I went and made 4 measurements out in the woods, and I got the circumference of a tree trunk, and that's in inches, and then I paired that with the height of the tree in feet. And those are the 4 ordered pairs that you see up in the diagram in the far upper right. Then I asked my calculator or an Excel program to attach a line of best fit. In other words, trying to have the line go through the points in a way that it describes the points. And now I want to see what the residual is. And residuals are calculated point by point. In fact, for each x value, what I'm going to do is find out how far I was off. For instance, when x is 4, the line predicted 1 height, but the actual height was 7. So what I want to know is how much was I off? In order to answer that question, I needed to know the height of that red dot right there, directly below the 0.47. So what I do is I take that x value here, and I plug it into the equation, and I get the corresponding y value, and that is 5. And then I also want to know when x is 6, what the line would have predicted. When x is 10, what would the line have predicted? And when x is 12, what would the line have predicted? So I need to know the height of the point on the line that's either directly above or directly below the actual data points. So I plug in each one of these, and each case I plug in the x, and then I get the corresponding y values. These y values that I just calculated here, the 5, 6, 8, and 9, are what I call a predicted y value. They're the y values that my line would have predicted. See, the line is imperfect. It's not going through all the points. But what it is doing is trying to predict what would y be for any given x. Now, to calculate the actual residual, I have to go actual y minus predicted y. That's how you get the residual. So the actual y is actually the y of the data point. That's the real tangible thing that I measured. So the actual y value for when I'm dealing with the 0.47 is the 7. So 7 minus my predicted value, which was 5. And that gives me the residual of 2. And now the same thing for this point right here. The actual y is 2, and it would have predicted a 6. So there's my -4 for the residual. For the next one, for this point right here, the actual y value is 12, but the line would have predicted a height of 8. So that gives me a +4. And then finally, for this point right here, the actual y is 8, and I would have predicted it to be a 9 using the equation of the line, so that gave me a residual of a -1. So these numbers, these residuals right here on the end, are trying to tell me how far off the line was at predicting the actual data point's y-coordinate. In summary, you calculate a residual for each individual x value contained in your data. To calculate your predicted y value, you plug in the x-coordinate for each data point into the equation to see what the line would have predicted. You subtract your predicted y value from the actual y value that was paired with it, with that particular x. And finally, that resulting number, the number you get when you do the subtraction, is called the residual for that x value. So we would say 2 is the residual when x is 4. We would say when x is 6, the residual is a negative 4. So when we read off residuals, it's point by point. Finally, here's a problem for you to try on your own for homework. And what you can do is basically use these x and y coordinates that are in the chart together with this equation right here, and you calculate the residuals. It may be helpful for you to get an approximate plot of the points, but bring your results to class tomorrow.